Hey guys, and welcome back to Studio Time. Today is a special episode because we have a walking cameraman right now. But today we're going to talk about something unique that a lot of questions have been asked about. And it's basically, how do you wire up all your gear to your DAW? What hardware gear do you have that is connected to it? What do you have in the machine room? What are you using as a MIDI controller? Keyboard, what extra hardware is sitting in your room? Okay, so let's start with the very, very simple basics. The heart of this studio is Cubase, which we see over there. You guys have seen it always in my Studio Time series. I use it with two screens, and on the main screen, generally, it's the arrangement window, and on the second screen is the mixer window. And I have all these presets to see like different things, whatever I want to do. And so if I accent the arrangement window, I have this presets button here. If I only want to see, for instance, sound design, I press on it, I only see sound design. If I want to see only my audio and instrument tracks, it does exactly the same thing there. If I only want to see the orchestra, I press the button over there and it does the same thing. And if I want to go back to my main screen, I press that. It needs to do a little bit of thinking because the most amount of tracks are going to get activated currently. And there we go. We have everything. So this touchscreen is the second most important thing in my studio. It contains custom-made macros and logical presets that are built in Cubase. And with this touchscreen, I can get to that all very quickly with some edit moves and such. So, but what is my computer setup in the background? Well, oh, there's one thing I forgot. You see that big TV over there, and you see one more computer screen that is black over there. Those two sets of screens are my Mac Mini, and they produce the picture. So the picture is being run on a different computer than my main Cubase computer. Okay, so how is that all connected? Well, let's walk to the machine room and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so we have a quick look here at the machine room. The top computer that you see right there is Vienda Ensemble Pro, computer number 4. Underneath we have a MIDI interface that is connected to the Mac Mini and to my Cubase machine for syncing the picture. And underneath we have my Cubase machine, and underneath 3 more VSL machines, and underneath some batteries. How are these machines all connected? They're connected via Ethernet with an Ethernet hub. They all talk to each other. You have to do a few settings, but it's relatively easy to set up. And I know a lot of people out there are already using a secondary, a third, or even a fourth computer for all your simple libraries. Very similar to what I'm doing. So that is the computer setup. Where it gets interesting is that a lot of extra stuff is in this room, and stuff you don't even see that is also connected to that same setup. So I'm just going to walk back and we're going to stick with the screens for a little bit and USB. So if the cameraman comes over here and films this little box right there. So what is that? That is a USB extender, and it's hooked up through Ethernet to a router and then to my computer, and that way I can extend my USB to here. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to use my keyboard or my mouse, and for that matter some of the other instruments. Underneath this screen here we see 2 physical Midi boxes. So scoot right in, and there we see them. Mark of the unicorn, 4 in, 4 out. So basically what those 2 boxes do, let me squeeze this back where it was, and what these 2 boxes do, they basically connect my Macintosh picture computer and my Cubase computer via MIDI. So MIDI in, MIDI out, back and forth, so they sync together. At the same time, these boxes are being used to hook up some additional MIDI that I need around here. For instance, the fader master. This one has a MIDI out and it goes into the secondary mark of the unicorn that is connected to Cubase. So movements that I do here, let's see. I'm not wearing my white glasses, but will react to that. So that is the MIDI part of things. And obviously there's the MIDI keyboard, the master keyboard, which is the NI complete keyboard, which is also hooked up with traditional MIDI to one of those boxes and comes into Cubase. So that is the MIDI part of things, the touchscreen, my main two screens, and those two screens. The next thing that we see here is my speaker setup. So zoom in on that a little bit. Those are the DIN audios, the Air 25s. They're pretty old, but they sound fantastic. And if I'm gonna steal the camera from the cameraman, and here we see the sub. It's sitting right there. So it's an 18-inch sub that is connected to this setup. And then if we look to the back, we see my surround speakers here. And for now, I put these small KRKs up here, the Crokit Sex, and there's one over there, that I use to have a feeling of the surround sounds. I used to have 2 extra Air 25s as surrounds, but it's overkill. You know, nobody has surround speaker systems that big. Theaters don't have them, unless you go to an IMAX that has full range surround. So this works really great for me. So that is the speaker part of it. So how are the speakers connected to the DAW? As you've seen in my machine room, there's also an Apollo interface, and I have it configured 16 in and 16 out, which means 4 outputs are going to the speakers of the Apollo, left, right, surround, left, right. 4 in total. The center I am not using. I leave that available for dialogue and special effects, and dubbing mixers are very happy that I do that. Excuse me. The next thing that is up is the extra inputs and outputs that are being used. For instance, I have a small headphone amplifier sitting somewhere there, and I have a headset right here, and I'll grab it every now and then if I need to listen to stuff on the headset. But I rarely do that. I usually do that at home by bringing a file back on my laptop, and then when I get out of the noise of the studio, I just play it on my headset, and then I'll check if I'm happy with the balance of things. So usually I don't use the headset that much in the studio. But those are 2 extra outputs as well from the Apollo. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is being used. 4 for the speakers, 2 for the headset. Okay, so if we just walk around the studio, we see all these really amazing boxes, and I'm just gonna randomly play on them. my new synthesizer has some extra hardware material. So how is that connected? Okay, we have to walk to the other side, and I'm going to show you two things. So follow me. Don't break your neck over the excessive amount of percussion in this hallway. Here we go. Why don't you give me the camera? Not that I'm a better cameraman, but I can show you what I want you to see. So, here we go. What do we see here? From the bottom up, we see a couple of preamps. These are very affordable preamps. They're made by ART, and I think they cost like as cheap as $150 and as expensive as $225, if I'm not mistaken. They have tubes in them, and they support all kinds of digital outputs into your sound card. So these 4 amplifiers in total, 8 tracks, are going to my first 8 inputs of my Apollo. Remember, I had 16 in and 16 out. If I move my camera up, there we see a magic box, which is the Presonus Studiolive 32R. So what is the Presonus Studiolive 32R? It's a very affordable budget mixer. I think it's around $2,500, $3,000. And it has high-class DA converters in and DA converters out. And so all the synths that you see in my room are connected in some form to this digital mixer. And then on my laptop, I can make presets and I can determine where everything is going. But I'll get to that in a second. Above it, we see the Eventide H9000R, which is an incredible multiprocessor. It's the newest in its form. It has the best of the Eventide reverbs, multi-effectors, choruses, the most incredible stuff. So that's actually the only hardware effect processor that I kept out of the 50 or 60 that I used to have that were all vintage that I sold. So now let's walk back to the other side while I'm giving the camera back to the guy who really knows how that stuff works, the cameraman. So follow me. I'm gonna grab a chair here. So I'm gonna put my glasses on, the right glasses. People that pay attention is I need the red glasses to the studio. So here we go. So this is my digital mixer where all the synths come back that I just was playing on. So if I play the Waldorf, we see the signal coming in here, and if I select this channel, we see there's a couple of things I can do on here. I can put a gate on it, I can put a compressor on it, I can equalize it if I wanted to, and I can limit it if I wanted to. None of that I'm actually doing because I try to do as much as processing as possible in the synth, and then I'm recording it into Cubase. So for the sake of easiness, they're all coming in on their own unique channels, and they're going to one stereo output only together into a channel here in Cubase that is called Presonus Mixer In. So that is this track here that we see, and above it we see the H9000R in. So we just talked about that I'm already using 4 preamps stereo going into the Apollo, that is 8. That I'm using 2 for the Presonus, so that brings us to 10, and then 2 for the H9000, and that brings us to 12. So technically I have 3 stereo inputs left that I can use, you know, for whatever purpose. For instance, if I wanted to add a few more microphone preamps, for instance, to record my drum kit, or with a bunch of microphones doing something else. So I have a bunch more of these preamps. So if I need them, I just put them there, you know? All these channels have their own colors and their own names and such. Now, what's really interesting with all these modern synthesizers, they all have USB connectors. And what can you do with USB with these synths? Well, the most easy one is that MIDI cables are not required anymore, because if I go to my Cubase session right here and I select where all my synths are in an ideal scenario, here we go, JXL external synths, Corbin, and if I select, for instance, the Moog 1, we see that the Moog 1 is inserted as like almost like a plugin. And that gives me the opportunity to play on my master keyboard while we're hearing the Moog 1. If I, for instance, want to hear the Moog Matriarch, I play on my master keyboard, but we hear the Matriarch. And this is all accomplished through USB, not traditional MIDI cables. Now, this is a beautiful thing. There are actually a few synths that are not only working with MIDI, but they're also sending audio back. That is a really beautiful thing. Some synthesizers, and the very, very special one is the Montage. The Montage can be a high quality sound card for your Cubase machine. So by just hooking up the Montage to Cubase, you can use the Montage as an 8-channel sound card for inputs and outputs, whatever you want. And that is really the future where we're going to. Besides that, all these synths that I have here, except for a few, constantly have firmware updates and software updates. And this is so easy now to do this with USB. I just take my Cubase computer online, I select the synth, and I say check for updates, boom, it does it. Another really great feature of, for instance, the modulars, we'll do a separate episode on these synthesizers. You can store your preset in the cloud through the synth itself by connecting it to Wi-Fi. You can share presets you built yourself with other modulars users around the world. It's incredible. And that's the whole new way of thinking about how a synthesizer can operate within a digital setup like myself. Some of them are really old school, like for instance the Erica one that sits on top. That is like old school modular. You need to patch the cables and you pull the signal out and you hook it up. It doesn't have MIDI in, you just have to create your own sounds with it. The Grp Synthesizer A4, that is like a custom built analog synth from this incredible talented instrument builder from Italy. That one has USB in, even though the whole synth is like analog as analog can be, but it comes with USB in. The same for the Moog Modular 1, 100% analog synth, but the modulation capacity with this, plus the fact that it has also USB in, really makes this like the 21st century of Moog. Instead of the Moog, Mini Moog Model G reissue, great sounding synth, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't come with any of these modern features that all these new synths have. Okay, so that's about the synths and the connection of the synths to Cubase through that mixer, USB MIDI being sent out, some of them even USB audio back into Cubase. There's another thing that I have on this laptop. So I'm going to the software right now, which is here, the E mode. And there's a lot of things that you can do with this thing. Devices, how many of those you have connected, to save a session, what you're working on, the effects change, how this is like being inserted and what you want to do with it, certain type of algorithms, you can route all kinds of in and outputs, and certain parameters. So at this point I've got lasers inserted, but I can go and then there's a thing that's called Super Spreader. And I'm basically gonna unload it where that arrow is, and then there we go. If I double click on it, it's gonna give me the parameters like mix, input gain, output gain, center suppress, dynamic pan, extra gain. So it allows me to program that box from here and do some really cool effects with it. what I told you with my in and outputs, so this thing has a unique stereo input. We talked about that. And I'm using 2 dedicated outputs of Cubase through the Apollo, what we talked about earlier, that go into the 9000s. I can do my editing here and it comes back. And I can just like record it in what I'm doing with this very specific box. Now, the other app that is running on this laptop is the lights for studio time. Disco. Yeah, so every time when we're done, let's go back to the level that we have, 25%. So we can have disco here at night by putting it on like strobe mode. Anyway, whatever. The last thing I want to show you that runs off this laptop is Cubase with Softube Modular. This is a really fantastic program. You can buy a lot of modules for it. And it sounds really, really exquisite. And it's like a self-running patch at this point. So if I go to my mixer and I go to Softube, here we go. So, yes, I sold my big modular system, but I do have my Erica, I do have the GRP, and I do have the SynthRX and the Vostok, and combined with Softube Modular, and I'm also using VCV Rack, which I'm going to talk about in a separate episode, which is a free app, so that is really great. So this laptop, to round it up, is controlling my digital mixer, the Presonus 32R Live. It's controlling the H9000 outboard Eventide effect processor. It's controlling the lights for studio time, and it's running an external Cubase session with Softube in it. So I can do my modular synthesis in there and then sync it with Cubase, because modular synthesis takes a little bit of processing. So I like to do it on a dedicated strong computer and not being part of Cubase, because my template is already on the heavy side. So you don't want to spend one track on just doing modular synthesis. So that's the reason. The other thing that's new in this studio is these 2 boxes. It's the Softube Console 1 fader and the Console 1. So what does this do? When you buy it, it comes with software that you install on your Cubase machine. And so on this particular synth, I installed the Console 1. There we're looking at it. And you can install this software over multiple different tracks. The moment you do that, these faders will start to show up, and they start to communicate with each channel that you inserted this on. And then you can do certain fader movements and things like that. Like for instance, if we're looking here, I'm moving the fader of the one track that I have it open. On my main screen, we see that this button right there is going louder and quieter. But the cool thing is that the processing that's being done here is done with that software, and it does it really, really well. So so when you buy it, it comes with a plugin that emulates certain types of like overdrive. It has a high cut, low cut. It's almost like a standard channel strip that you would expect from like a Neve desk or something like that. So to play a little bit through it, so you could hear what you can do. So I have a simple bass, my input, low cut, high cut. This we're going to leave on its own right now, because that's a gate. Let's go to EQ. Compressor. drive, character of the drive, panorama, and then your output level. So the cool thing about this is, you might think, well, why should I even get this? And I thought that too. But I did get it because I really wanted to try this. Now, Softube has a really great knowledge of analog modulations, and I got really interested in Softube. What we talked about, the modular synthesis that I run on that particular laptop, going into Cubase. And they also have some really great compressors that they made for UAD. And so I looked into this and I tried it, and it's really great. It's really great. This is not part of my template because I have so many computers that need to be absolutely in sync with one another and identical, and I would have to buy a bunch of these for each computer rig with the software. So I'm the only one using it, and I use it primarily in the final stage of mixing, but I also use it during sound design. So when I insert it on like a certain track and I want to create more character, I use like something that really feels like an old school analog desk. I think they made a really, really lovely product, and it's also made for people that are old school, used to doing things with knobs and not with a mouse. So I'm a mouse guy, even though I started in the 80s as a traditional engineer with knobs and with faders. I am fine with the mouse, but it does give you a really, really lovely quality. So, ladies and gentlemen, in short, that rounds it up how my computer setup and all the hardware is being connected with one another. And no, it was a very hot topic question when we asked you guys. If you still have questions, please leave them below and we'll get to it and then ask me anything or something like that. So, to round it up, in short, Cubase running off a PC is the heart. 4 extra PCs running Vienna Ensemble Pro are next to it. The sound card is the UAD Apollo. Then there's a secondary computer, the iMac, which is running picture only in a second Cubase set. And it's talking to one another with my main rig with 2 Mark of the Unicorn 4 in, 4 out MIDI interfaces. My Apollo has 16 in and 16 out. I have 4 stereo ART microphone preamps that are connected, so I can hook up microphones and immediately start recording. I have the Presonus 32R Live digital mixer that is controlled from my laptop, where all the hardware synths in this studio to a certain form are connected to it. None of these synths have actually hardware MIDI cables going in. Everything is done via USB to Cubase. Some of these synths will allow to send audio at the same time. For the ones that don't, are connected to the 32R Presonus. There's an 89000 Eventide hardware effect processor that is separately connected to the Apollo, stereo in, stereo out, fully controlled by this laptop. There's the Softube Console 1 fader, Console 1 processor. With the software that comes with it, I can process uniquely an audio channel in Cubase using their emulation techniques to get a certain sound. The laptop furthermore runs the software to control the lights of studio time and create disco at night. And besides that, there's a third iteration of Cubase running with Softube modular synthesis in sync with this Cubase rig. So I can do modular synthesis in there. So, quickly, that rounds it up. And I hope you like this episode.